Hello everyone. I'm gonna move to another window. Okay. Just gonna make sure that I can hear me. Yeah, should be good. So today I have a kind of different talk for you. Instead of doing a classical talk, I'm gonna do some live coding, and I still try to prepare some in between on the in between information theory. So. My name is Eduardo. I'm posted on GitHub and Twitter on Blue Sky esm.dev, although you can also find me as Posva. And today I want to talk to you about data fetching, and more specifically about async state management, how to keep it clean, and why it's so important. So we often think about async state management when we talk about fetching, data fetching. But when we think about it, async state management has been in browsers from the very beginning. If you take, so I'm taking a Space Jam website from 1996. When you click around in the application, you have some async state management happening. For example, if you pay attention to the browser UI, you can see that we have some loading, we have some things changing, and nowadays the connection is very fast. But I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to visit a website, I would have the images going a little bit slower. So we can still reproduce that. It looks more like this. If I go to another place, it's gonna take some time, and then I go in there and things load progressively. And so when you think about it, there is some async state management happening here. It's just that you don't have any control over it. The browser does everything for you. And this is still true today for any asset. So any static website or any asset is still handled by the browser, and the browser handles the loading and how it's displayed while it's loading. And that's fine. But today, applications are a bit more complex also than static sites. We build full-fledged applications. And so we still have that async state management handled by the browser, but we have a whole new other layer of complexity to handle. And it's actually very important because when you think about a website, if you try to think for a moment about the last website you enjoyed using it. So instead of being negative, because I think it's very easy to think about the last application we didn't enjoy, like booking a flight probably, or bank applications, not great. But think about a good one. Try to remember a positive experience that is recent. And now try to think about what made that experience enjoyable. So most of the time, if you are able to pinpoint what make it enjoyable, you're gonna find one of two or three things. First one is it was beautiful, right? A UI that looks great, that has a design that connects with us, that we feel good using, is going to feel enjoyable. In fact, there are even research that show that people think that, or they are going to perceive a UI to be more efficient or easier to use just because the UI is more beautiful, when in fact it could be just the same UI, just presented with better colors and stuff like that. And so what I want to say is this is similar to if you know about it, it's beauty bias, which is something that is, I think, is not completely sure. It's like just based on books, but it's the idea that beauty in persons, in this case, can lead to some kind of privilege, or just people are gonna perceive or are gonna let other people who are beautiful do things that they wouldn't let other people not beautiful do. So the same thing applies, right? And so this is the first concept, which I obviously not going to cover in a talk about async state management. And then we have all the things that we can act upon. The second thing is you feel efficient using the tool or the application. So for example, the application is assisting you in your task, but it lets you feel like you're in control. It lets you feel like you're using you can step in any specific moment that is required, and it doesn't feel tedious to use. You don't have to do anything that is not interesting. So for example, I like to think about, in this case, broader user interfaces. So planes I like to use for this example, most of the planes today are mainly automatic, right? But you still need the pilot to be able to step in at the right moment in order to just handle anything that might go wrong. And so we can see this as a spectrum, and it's very important to find the balance between having a tool that completely assists you. So that would be like full AI, for example, which I think at some point for some tasks we're gonna see, but it has its risk. And then another thing that is completely manual. So I think in web applications, you're not gonna see that much, these kind of things you in between, but you still need to find a balance. And so the example with the plane is that by being by having full automatic control, full automatic mode on the plane, you can have failures. For example, any sensor, any unexpected exception on the software is going to create a failure. And that failure, if you don't let a human intervene, you cannot correct. So examples are, in the case of planes, are fatal. So in 2019, there was the Boeing Max, I don't remember which number, which had crashes because of this failure that didn't allow the failure in the sensors, and the plane crashed because it didn't allow the pilots to get into it. Fortunately, in web, we don't have these kind of issues. We are not dealing with, most of the time, we're not dealing with people's lives. But I still think it's a very nice example of the spectrum. And then on the other side, we have the fully automatic, the fully manual. So that would be the user has to do its own measurements. So for example, when you are in a car, you have to think about the distances. Are we far enough from the next car? And so we can have an interface in the car that helps us do these measurements better. So we don't rely on our judgment, which can be just wrong. And so that's the spectrum. To human, you have errors, and systems that are fully automated have failures. And so you want to, even in web applications and in UIs in general, you want to be somewhere in between. Find a balance that is adequate for your kind of application. And the last thing is feedback loops. So you want your user to feel like there is something happening, there is an interaction going on. If the user interacts with the application and there is nothing telling them that, or rather confirming that they did something, they are going to feel, they're not going to feel reassured that the application is working. You probably have this example. For me, this is the most common example I have. It's like going to a website, banks, for example, and you have things loading, and some of them have a loading spinner, others do not. They take too long. You don't know why. You have an error. It says unexpected error and no details, nothing to say. Just generate buttons, call support. Great. As if I want to spend 1 hour on the phone. And so it's very, it just makes you feel like so scared about any possible error in the website that you don't want to use the website. Now, these three things are, in my opinion, the most important one. And they all help in a way to reduce friction. The idea is try to reduce the friction for the user interactions, because when you think about it on the browser specifically, web applications, almost any interaction is going to send, some request to a server to read data or to write data. And this is going to create some kind of friction because you have to wait for the server to respond. So of course you can make your server faster, and you should make your request performant, but you still have to wait on the client, and you cannot control if the client has a fast internet or not. So how do you deal with that? So what I have here is a small demo, which I think is not running. So that's why, or it is running, but has some bugs. I'm gonna remove these because I'm not hearing anything anyway, and it's a bit annoying. So this demo is not using Pina Colada yet, and it's just a contact search, very simple. So we have a search where we can find some people here. We have some loading speeders because I was on throttling. The API is local, so it's very fast. And we can select a person, we can edit, change the photo, for example, and then this is going to update, but as you can see, we have some issues. Like here we have the updated
We
version,
don't
but here
see your
on the left,
screen anymore. Could you reshare it?
it doesn't work anymore. Oh,
That's
it stopped. Okay. It just stopped like that.
perfect. You're
That's so weird.
back.
Okay, where did I stop then? Did it
Oh,
just cut out?
like about a minute ago. So I don't think you have to go back too far.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
All right, so I was showing this application and saying that we have this application of contacts where we have a search that calls an API that is running locally. So I can just filter here, go to a profile. For example, I'm going to go to this one. And you can also edit the profile. So you can randomize the photo, change the names, and save. And as you can see already, we have some issues here because on the left, the search is not being updated, but on the right, we have an update. And if we search again, then we get the new version. And as you can see, maybe you have also some fetching load spinners that appears a bit too quickly. So my goal here is going to update this code to show you a better approach to the fetching and how to make it still maintainable so you don't have to handle too much loading state around the pages. So this is the page we are on. And I have here a function to refetch, and I'm manually handling the loading, which is something that we make sometimes. We might have this in a composable or in a store, it doesn't really matter. And here I'm watching the search text, which is what we have in the input and on the URL. And if we do a refetch, and we're going to just call the search contacts with that value and put that into another value here, a shallow ref. And the route query here is just a ref that is connected to the router. So if we change it, it pushes. So as you can see here, if I write something, I can see the URL being updated. All right, so other than that, search contact is a very simple function that calls with fetch local API. Nothing really interesting here, nothing that we're gonna touch. And then we have the detail here. So this is the page that you see on the right. We have a debounce ref here, so we did take the time to handle that loading spinner. I'm going to talk about it in a moment. And pretty much the same thing. So we have some duplication of code, like refetch here with the async status. We have also error handling, and we have a watcher. So it's pretty much the same kind of code. And then we have refetch in the end. So we are doing our own manual version of invalidation and saying, okay, we need to re-get the new value of the content. So the first thing I want to do here is let's talk about the search. So the search is right here, is very simple, but we have all these status that appears immediately, and we're not going to change that yet. So how do I move these to Pina Colada in order to simplify the code and then later we're going to also be able to share in a way the mutation, so the change of the context, so we don't have to write all these manual code for invalidation and stuff. So here what I'm going to do is use query, which is the main function we can use in Pina Colada. So we have use query here. I should be able to import it. And we take an object, and this object is going to have two important keys, two properties. The first one is going to be the key, which is going to be an array of properties. This allows us to have a hierarchical cache, so we can invalidate, in a tree, you can imagine you invalidate a whole set of cache based on a parent property. For example, here we're going to have contact search and, contact search. And then we're going to have here the text of the value. So here is going to be search text. Now, this. Now, if I do it this way, I'm not going to have reactivity because this is just an array being passed. What I want to pass is something reactive, like a computer property or a function here. And then the query, which is simply going to be the search context here. Now, something important for the query is we want the query not to have any parameter. So differently from search contacts here, which has a parameter, we don't want to put anything in the parameters of the query so that we can let the query be called automatically. And this is going to be an important part of the cache. We want to let the library call the query for us when it's needed. So here we're going to return search context with the value of the search text, just like that. Just making sure I'm not messing up anything here. And we have other options that are going to be useful, but we're not going to use too much, which are stale time, which allows us to decide for how long the data is fresh. So for example, if you are using an API that is not updating very often, or a public API, you probably won't have a high stale time, so that while you're using the application, the queries are not going to get re-executed until the data is considered stale. And for example, these can be a whole day if you want to, or an hour, or 5 seconds, or even 0 seconds if you want to. Every time that you want to refetch, you refetch instead of having to wait for 5 seconds for the data to be stale. It really depends. By default, we have 5 seconds here, which I'm going to leave. And we have some other options like GC time, which is going to be similar to stale time, but it's about garbage collection. So in order to not have a cache that always grows and you have an application that becomes slow, we have this timer that is triggered after the query is not being used. So this is things you don't need to care about, things you don't want to care about because they are too hard to handle everywhere if you need to. But basically, your application doesn't consume too much memory. So now that we have these, we're going to get a few properties from useQuery. We're going to get the data, if I'm not mistaken, and then we're going to have some other few things. Just 2 seconds here. So here we have the data, which is going to be the search result. Yes. And then we have a sync status as well, which is conveniently named that way. And everything else I'm going to remove here. So I can just remove it that way. So the function refetch, also I don't want it. I don't need any more. This is done automatically. So I'm removing quite some code. And these also not used. So let's see how everything works or breaks. So here, I still have the same behavior. As you can see, nothing changed. But if we take a look at the network, we're going to see a few changes. First, if I type something, you're going to see that the next time I type it, it doesn't refetch again. Okay, this is because by default, the data is fresh for 5 seconds. So now 5 seconds elapsed. So if I do it, they're going to be triggered again. But as you can see, it only happened twice, even though I typed the thing like 5 times. So this is interesting mostly for navigation, I think. And this is where one of the first places we can apply having a cache to improve the user experience and the performance is that when you go back and forth in applications, and this happens very often, I'm not talking about only paginations, but the user clicks on a link, they realize, oh, this is not the page I wanted to be on, so they go back. You want to have the data there already. You don't want to wait for the data to be fetched again. You can fetch in the background, which is something that is easy to configure, but being able to go back quickly and correct the errors is going to make you feel like you are in control of the application. So this aligns with what I want to explain before. So this is almost very basic. I'm pretty sure many of you already have this feature implemented by yourselves on stores. It's not that complicated to add. What becomes a little bit more complicated is with the mutations. So let's talk about this page here. I'm going to do 2 things. So the page here, this is the ID, so the detail page, as we call it, has a little bit more code because it has both the fetching of the user and the writing of the user, okay? So we have a query and a mutation, which is the vocabulary we use in Vue query. And this is how we're gonna do it. We are going to do a very similar thing. Also, you'll notice that here we have an error that is being displayed. I don't have the code to display an error though, like to trigger an error. So I don't think I'll be able to show that, but it's there. And here we even took the time to do a debounce rev. So what is this? When we type here, I mean, now we cannot see it, but I think I have a plugin that I need to disable. Yeah, I should have disabled this. Okay, so when you type here, it flashes with a loading spinner, okay, very quickly. And most of the time, and this is also, I repeat this, I have repeated this so many times, but this is about perceived speed. And there are papers on these that show that under a certain threshold of time, the user still think that an interaction is instant, that the feedback is immediate. So you don't want to display a loading spinner too soon. You want to wait at least 100 milliseconds or even more, 200, maybe sometimes 300. Depends on your users. But the research papers show that under 1 second, the wait is still acceptable. Now, I wouldn't wait for 1 second. 1 second is a bit too much, but it's still okay. Over 1 second, it becomes annoying. And there also, they say that over 10 seconds, people just quit. Like they don't want to use the application anymore. But under 100 milliseconds, people are, or we are unable to differentiate something from something that is immediate or took 100 milliseconds. So I would say at least 100 milliseconds. You wait for at least 100 milliseconds before displaying a loading spinner, because sometimes the API doesn't even take that time to reply back. So if you just wait for the API to reply under 100 milliseconds, for the user that looks instant. And you don't have this flash that also creates a layout shift and it's like, oh, what happened? The user is like, something appeared and I don't know what appeared there. So here we try to handle that, or rather we handle that. So for example, let me go slow or even 3G. If I randomize the photo here and I save, I didn't handle it. Oh, I did. I don't know why it took so long, but I think it's bugged. The version I did without pinning currently is bugged. So you have the loading spinner appearing there for a small amount of time. Maybe it's just too slow. But the idea is that it refetches and it appears there only after some time. So if it's fast enough, so for example, when it's nearly instant, you don't see that happening. You see the flash of the image changing, but you don't see a loading spinner here. I feel like you're probably gonna have to trust me on this one because you probably cannot see it with the 30 FPS on the video, but you can try it by yourself later on the demo. So going back to the code, this is what the debounce ref does, is that, oh, it's 300. I should have put it lower, like 200, but it waits a little bit before changing. Now with loading is a little bit different because you don't necessarily want to wait for something from loading to not loading, right? If it goes from loading to idle because it got the data, you probably want to also display that immediately, which is not something I'm handling here, but we can with Pina Colada. So here, I'm going to do the same thing as before. Use query, and we're going to have a key, and this key is going to be, we're going to do contacts, and here we're going to have the ID. So the ID is going to be route.params.id. And then we have the query, and so here the auto completion is a bit too much. We don't need to do all these things now. We should return just like that. Contact with the params. So the idea here you'll notice is that I'm using the parameters inside of the query and I'm also putting that in the key. Now this is crucial because the key is going to create an entry in the cache, and this is where all the data is stored and globally stored, because we can also access the data in all the pages of the components, and we have still one single source of truth. And it also helps us with what we're going to see with handling optimistic UI, so updating the data where it is before even waiting for the application to reply. So let me see. here, the refetch, we don't need that anymore. Watch, we don't need that. And we still need some kind of update contact here. Now it doesn't do too much, so I can remove that. And this is where we use mutation. So we're gonna import that, and we're gonna do, here is gonna be just mutation. And the mutation, differently from a query, can take parameters because we are not interested in the cache, in the results of the mutation that much. We just want to use them when the mutation is resolved, is settled, but that's it. We just stop there. So we take this function, we add the parameters that we want. In this case, I want to add a new contact. So the contact is going to be a partial, yeah, that's what I want. A partial contact and the ID of the ID of the contact has always to be there. And then I just call update contact, which I think is called patch. Yeah, patch contact. And now I can remove these. So we have, the idea of mutation is that we have a bunch of hooks. We have on error, on mutate, on settle, on success. And this is where we're going to implement the optimistic UI. So let me give you an example first of why do we want to do this. When you're in a page and you edit something, most of the pages are going to disable the thing you were changing, and then you're gonna, once the request is resolved, is gonna change the display. But when you are on the train and you change something, your internet is not that great. You have like a Li-Fi, as some people say. So you have internet, then it goes off, then it comes back, and so your browser has to do the request again. They fail, whatever. So while the browser is doing that, you're blocked. It's like, oh, you cannot go back. Imagine, oh, I actually did a mistake. I want to edit again, but you have to wait for the whole thing to be finished. And sometimes if it fails, it can take a lot longer. So the thing is, most of the time when we are doing these kind of operations, we know the result. If things work well, we know that, well, the comment here is gonna get updated. So what we do, the optimistic update, the idea is, in order to avoid this frustration of having to wait for the UI to be refreshed in order to use the application, and this is even worse in mobile. We have a UI, like a drawer that goes on top. Have to wait for the drawer to be finished before using the application. This is really painful. So this is the kind of interaction that is going to drive your users away from the application. And being able to optimistically update the UI, and then if anything goes wrong, you roll back and you tell the user, you take the actions needed depending on the UI. This is going to be much more frictionless for the user. And this is going to drive your user interest up as well. All right. So here, what we can do is when we update the contact, we can just update the contact in the cache. And then it will just be reflected automatically because we have Vue and things are reactive and they just work. And what we do also, and it's important not to forget, is to still invalidate the cache so that we trigger a network request on the background. Sometimes some people might not want to do that, but most of the time you should, because you don't know if the things change, and you should at least tell the cache that it's not fresh anymore. But most of the time you still want to refresh with the data from the server. You never know. So here, what I'm going to do is use the hooks. Did I migrate everything? No, I didn't finish. I need to put data contact here. I can do error, async status. I don't need the debounce anymore. The contact is handled here. This is good. And let's just rename the things here. Update contact. Yeah, I renamed that one. So mutation returns a mutate function that we're going to call update contact. And I think that's it. Right? Yeah. Okay. So now in the mutation, what we have is the hooks. The first hook is on mutate. So on mutate is going to trigger immediately on the mutation. So it's even before the request is sent or whatsoever. And it allows us to set up anything we need, change the cache optimistically. So here, what we do is, if we want to update, for example, the version here on the right, sorry, we're gonna retrieve that information. So we're gonna get the old contact, and we're gonna say, okay, I need to update that. We're gonna get the query cache, which I think I'm not using it, so I need to put it here. Query cache, let's use query cache. Wait, yeah, oops. So here I can do query cache dot get query data with the context and the vars ID, yes. So my next point is, what are these arguments? The first thing is the variables that we get past the mutation. So that's important. That's why it's important to have these arguments on the mutation, is because we can reuse that information in all hooks of the mutation. So here, I'm just gonna get the new contact. That's what we want to get, and I don't have anything else here. So new contact, and this is going to give me some information. Now the query data here is going to be a contact. I think it's just a contact, right? Do I have that? Yeah, I have it. Okay. So what we can do with this information is return it. Now, we return it because we are going to use it for the rollback. And here what we do is we update the cache, the cache with the new version. So we do query cache, set query data with the new contact. There you go. And the new contact can be also not valid, so we need to kind of merge it with the old version because it's partial, right? So here contact equals old contact, new contact, and then here contact, and then here. And this is a bit weird because I need to rename the variable, but that's okay. So what I'm doing here is that right away when I'm mutating, so for example, if I have slow or 3G, I'm gonna see the value here updated right away, but the fetch is actually taking a bit longer. And of course, on the left, I haven't done anything. So what do I do to change on the left as well? Well, this is just the beginning of optimistic updates. The reality about optimistic updates is that it does offer a very nice UI experience for the user, but it's not that easy to set up. And you could set up conventions in your data and how you create the keys in order to mostly have a config-based invalidation and optimistic UIs. But of course, if Pina Colada had that, it would be too much in order to be used for applications because the data from application to another changes a lot. The conventions, sometimes you do not have control over them. So instead, in Pina Colada, you have access to the really low level layer, the cache, and you can interact with it. And most of the time, I think this is better because as soon as you write one or two lines of caching, then the AI is going to be able to pick that up for you and autocomplete most of the code as well. And of course, once you're able to get comfortable with it, you can find the places where you can optimize and refactor your code and maybe come up with a layer that sets up conventions that work for your team. But it's something that I feel shouldn't be on the layer of Pina Colada because it would just make you have to wrap your head around an API and sometimes just complicate things and just not worth it at all. Yes, the thing I want to do here. So one thing we want to do here, although it's not going to have an effect because I haven't shown it here in this code, but I should, is that we should cancel any ongoing queries. So query cache.cancel queries is not the one. We want to cancel any query related to the data we're changing because we know that if the browser, if the application is already fetching something, there is no point in waiting for them because we're going to get an outdated. Now, of course, sometimes you might want to get that outdated version in the meantime. So that's why you still have to write it. And then the next thing you want to do is invalidation. So invalidation should not happen on mutate because we haven't sent the request yet. So it happens on settled here. So on settle happen both on error and success. And here you get access to everything we define. And the most interesting one is going to be the context. The context is going to contain the old content and the new content. And now you might notice something is that they are possibly undefined. And the reason they are possibly undefined is because if the mutation fails, then we're not going to enter this code here, right? If we have an error, the onMutate is not going to even trigger. There is no point. So instead, we get undefined here, and we can act accordingly and we get everything else. So here we do query cache.invalidate queries, and we pass all the keys that we want to invalidate. So for example, we have contacts with new contact ID. Now, instead of doing that, I can do this. So vars is the parameter passed to the mutation, which contains the ID, and we can just do that. And we also want to invalidate, for example, contact search, and I don't think it does have an S. But what happens here is that by invalidating the query, then the library is going to automatically refetch. It's going to say, okay, the data is not fetched anymore, and they request an invalidation, so I'm going to refetch the data. I'm seeing some of the question pops on the chat, but I think I'm going to answer them after. I'm realizing I'm low on time also. Let me give you an example of here. Let's put foo, save, and I'm on slow, so it takes a lot longer, but you see the fetching appearing, and on the left, they change. If I don't have any throttling, it's going to be another story. So bar, here it changes immediately, and here it also changes fast. Now, on the left, we haven't handled the optimistic UI. It's a lot more work also to handle it because we need to go here and handle getting the array. We have to find in the search results the contact, we have to update it. And so it takes a little bit more work, but it's something you need to do in order to have this optimistic update. And the last thing we need to do, and we should not forget about, is very important, is on error. So if there is an error, we want to roll back, okay? And there are a few things to notice about the on error. We want to make sure, before doing the rollback, that the cache still contains the value that we put in it. So what I mean is, the new contact. So that's why we return the old contact here. The old contact, not the new contact. If the new contact, not exactly, equals the query cache dot get query data contacts with the new contact ID. So here I can do the same trick as before, ID here. If it's the same, then we should just roll back that. So to the old version. If anybody else touch the cache after us, it means that we no longer are the last user of the cache. So we should not roll back. We're probably gonna roll back to a wrong version. This is very common when you have multiple pieces of the UI that can modify the same cache information. And that's why also when you get the contact, you probably want to get the information from the cache because maybe someone else applied an optimistic update, and that way you always get the last version. And so this gives you a fully automatic UI that feels like everything works all the time instantly, and then you handle any errors as they go. Now, to close a little bit, because I think I'm going to keep out a few things. These APIs could be moved to a plugin. And in fact, the plugin API of Pina Colada is quite flexible. So if we go to the main, here I turn off the delay. So here I have two plugins. We have query hooks So these are hooks for the query, because queries by default do not have hooks. Differently from mutations, it's usually an empty pattern if you want to have hooks into the queries. You don't want to have toast, for example. Do not overflow users with toast. Usually it's not worth it. Most of the time, try to go for error feedback, and success feedback really depends on the users you have and how critical the success of a task was, and if you have many things happening at the same time. Also, going for these loading spinners I'm showing here, the idea is with Pina Colada or with any asynchronous state management layer, you have that low-level control or access to the loading state. So you can put the loading state in specific places so they don't attract too much attention as well. And now this depends on the kind of information. For example, I put a loading here when I'm searching, but honestly, it should be inside here so it doesn't highlight too much. It could be something else when it's loading. If I'm updating the data from another place, just make it subtle, make it so it doesn't interrupt the user in their flow. Okay. And so going back to the plugins, and the plugins in Pina Colada are very important because they keep the baseline of Pina Colada very light. I think it's less than 3 kilobytes, or maybe is by the time I reach full feature of, all the features I want, maybe it reaches to 3 kilobytes. This is what always happens with libraries, is they start very small, very, very tiny, and then they grow a little bit. But I did manage to have a plugin API that is quite flexible, and I can offset and offload all these features that are not always needed. For example, mutations are too shakeable. So if you don't use mutations, you are not gonna get that code. So it's gonna get it has a smaller baseline in Pina Colada. Plugins are also quite flexible because they are based on Pina plugins. So Pina plugins, we get access to the store, and we basically do on action on a store, and then we can get access to all the things with the name. So these are all the actions of a store, and we can hook into them to pretty much do anything we want. For example, we have create and extend. Where is it? That allows us to change the cache entry to add information, or even to override some of the properties. For example, the Pina Colada delay plugin, what it does is it overrides the entry cache so that the async status is a debounce, is some kind of debounce rep, but only for the loading state, so that everything else just works the same, but we have delayed updates on the loading state. So it's pretty cool. And so here, for example, we have one for, I was doing the remove. So, and everything is type safe. So once you do the name, you have type safety also on the arguments. And you have more things you can create, refs and computer properties. So this one, for example, is just a log. Now let me give you an example on the search. So here I can do GC time and do 2 seconds. And so every time I search, every time I write something different, it's going to create a new cache entry. So I end up with a cache that grows and grows, and you don't want that cache to grow too much because the user can search a lot. So this is the kind of places where you're going to put a lower garbage collection time, for example. And if we look at the console here, when I search, I'm going to see all these remove appearing. Yeah. So because I'm not typing anymore, it just garbage collected the things that are not active. So it automatically tracks everything that is active, not active, to avoid fetching anything that isn't used in the UI, because that's completely wasteful. And so that's the whole idea, is you're giving you the tools to reduce latency, reduce the duplicate request, display loading where there is loading anywhere in your UI, and have optimistic UI so that the application really feels like what the user expects to do. So fast and efficient. I don't want to go too much over my time. So the last thing I want to say, well, there are a few more things to talk about, of course, like define query to have reusable queries, is like composables, but with a use query that are tracked. All of this is documented. There are more plugins on the way. There is official support for data loaders. So very quickly, data loaders is a new API for, new has been new for 2 years, but a new API for Vue router to integrate data fetching or any kind of asynchronous work in navigation guards, so that when you enter a component, when you mount the component, the data is already there. And so it offers a whole lot of benefits, but it's a very light solution to data fetching. And Pina Colada has official support, and it looks pretty much like this. Define Colada loader, and you have a very similar API. We have signals as well so signals, and that's an abort controller signal. So to automatically abort fetches that are no longer valid, and a lot more. If you want to use it, go ahead. It's already usable. It's still on 0.13. I'm thinking about making it stable this year. It's just too many things moving at the same time, so it takes a little bit more time to work on them. And that's it. If you want to talk about it on Twitter, go visit me at Sky and on Blue Sky ESN. I think I'm not logged in here in this browser. Just shoot me a question or the discussions. I'm pretty active on the repository. And that's it. Thank you for your time.
We do have a few questions for you.
Yeah. And I put the
Okay.
okay.
Let's see. What kind of browser do you use for developing?
Edge. Edge or Chrome.
Okay. Okay.
I don't use anything fancy. I don't
All
know. Is there
right.
anything fancy I should be using?
This question was asked in a few variations, but what is the difference
Yeah.
between Pina Colada and the TanStack query?
So this can be answered for so many angles. I think what most people are looking for is why should they use one or the other, and that is Pina Colada has official support for data loaders, and it's about 25 times smaller, something like that, or 25%. It's a very small compared to TanStack Query because it's specifically designed for Vue. It won't be working on other libraries. The thing is also, it's also my version of client-side caching, and handling all these optimistic updates. It's just that the API, I purposely made it similar to TanStack Query, so it's easy for people to have knowledge transfer, so they don't have to relearn something new. There are things to learn that are specific to Pina Colada and bring other improvements to its usage. But my goal was, well, TanStack Query is so well known that I just might as well just completely reuse the same name for some of the options, so things are simpler.
Thank you. All right, this one kind of builds on that with Vue Query has also the DevTools plugin and also supports infinite scroll directly with use infinite query. Is this also planned for Pina Colada? Are there performance advantages?
So yeah, there is still not the Vue DevTools plugins. It's something I have to work on. The API is there, so the plugin API allows it to hook into pretty much anything. Infinite scroll is supported, but there is not a direct support as it's asked. It's something I want to add, but there are a few other things that are a little bit more crucial first. But yeah, it's definitely going to be there. And performance advantages. Memory-wise, is a little bit more efficient. It takes less memory, but I don't think you should be looking for performance advantages in these kind of libraries most of the time. I mean, if I'm honest, yeah, it's supposed to be faster, but you shouldn't be using this as an argument. I don't think it only matters in very edge cases where you have very large data, maybe. But I will still benchmark it.
Okay, great. That was the last question we had time for today. Thank you, Eduardo, for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, y'all. We have a quick a couple videos to go through, and then we'll hear from Alex Lichter next.
Hi everyone, my name is Eduardo. I'm a front-end freelancer and a Vue.js core team member since 2017 or such, and I'm known for being the author of Vue Router and also Pinia. You will gain a comprehensive understanding of state management with Vue.js in many scenarios, including Nuxt with server-side rendering. We also explore concepts that are available in both Vue and Nuxt, such as refactoring with composables and unit testing. I created Mastering Pinia based on how I designed Pinia and how I have seen it used in real-world applications by companies I have consulted for. I believe in the power of hands-on learning, so I've designed this course to prioritize practice over passive viewing. In it, we dive deep into Pinia, covering everything from the basics to the most advanced features like plugins and server-side rendering.
I was totally looking at the wrong spot. So up next is Resumu, aka Little Sound. Join us building Vue high performance feature Vapor Mode. Resumu, aka Little Sound, is a Vapor team member, a self-funded open source enthusiast aspiring to do what she loves full time. Welcome to the stage, Resumu.
Hello everyone. I'm so happy to be here today to share with you things about Vapor. And again, I want to say thank you for Vue Nation giving me this opportunity. While my English isn't very good now, so I will speak very slow. And let me introduce myself first. My name is Li Zunmu, and my GitHub handle is Little Sound. I'm an indie developer from China, and I'm really passionate about open source. I'm a part of the Vue Vapor team for over the past year. I've been deeply involved in building this exciting new feature for Vue. And besides working on Vue, I also create some fun projects like Nolabase, QRS, GUI AI, and Interline Translate. And I also part of the ELK team. Alright, so let's get started. You can say 10 years ago, Will came onto the scene and built an amazing community. From that, we also got Vite, a very popular front-end build tool. Today, I want to tell you about the next upgrade in Vue. It's called Vapor. If you are a big fan of Vapor, you might already know what I'm going to introduce. Vapor is Vue without the virtual DOM, like Solid, right? Yes, but instead of getting into this too much, let's think about this in another way. If it were even you, the creator of Vue, how would you make Vue even faster? Well, if you look at the current performance rankings of front-end frameworks, first, you'll notice that React performance score is 68. Now, what ideas would you think? How would you go about making Vue even faster? Continue use virtual DOM and then do more optimization? If you have seen some of Evan's talk, you might know that. Yes, Vue has already added a lot of optimizations to the virtual DOM. So now Vue is here and it's scored 80. If you still want to get faster, what will you do? How will you solve this? You may want to know who is the best one on the performance list. It solved this, but how did it? Yeah, that one is Vanilla.js. It's the golden standard of this benchmark, which is 100 out of 100. So, what is vanilla? It's the default flavor of the ice cream we eat. So, vanilla is the native DOM operations code. Yes, it directly operates as DOM itself without virtual DOM. But why is it so fast? It's because it's highly flexible. If the person who writes it master enough optimizations techniques, they can do a lot of hack tricks decide on this test to make the performance even better. Let's take a look. For example, reduce updates. First, let's look at bad approach. The bad approach is that you got an element, and if you want to change the width and the height, and you have several values, then you might write this way, changing one value at one time. But because it will rerun every time, this would be very slow. So there, a bad approach is that you can first merge all the updates and then apply them at once. Here another example, element delegations. For example, the bad approach is that I have a list with 10,000 rows, and each item has a delete operations, so I have 10,000 delete attacked. This will be very slow too. The better approach is that we could have one listener over the parent and then look at for the element we want to handle it. This way, we have only one event listener, so it will be very fast as well. There are many other optimization techniques, such as template reuse, reactivity, programming, and so on, which can also speed it up. So we actually don't need virtual DOM, right? But sometimes using native DOM APIs directly is hard. You need to learn many tricks, and you also need to think about how to work together with your team. That's when we use frameworks. But how do we solve this problem? The answer is right here. The answer is in Vue. We haven't been directly writing DOM APIs for a long time, and we also don't write actually running this directly. Do we? Yeah, we actually all install Vue to help us. Because beside Vue, we know there's something called compiler. It can take the source code, like Vue SFC file, and based on the rollers we set up, compile it into runtime code. Actually, we have been using this way to compile a virtual DOM runtime in Vue for a long time. But like I said before, virtual DOM runtime is too far from real DOM operations. It is not easy to change, and in every re-render, extra work runs every time, whether you need to them or not. So we want to use compiler, but take away virtual DOM. and use compiler to build DOM options right away. So we want to use compiler but take away virtual DOM and use compiler to build DOM operations right away. So back to Vapor. If we make a smart enough compiler, it can take a Vue SFC file and compile it into native DOM operations, and it knows how to use these hack tricks to optimize performance. So our framework can actually performance close to vanilla in benchmark tests. This is the foundation of Vapor's all. So congratulations, you invented Vapor. So from that, let's look what this way makes for Vue Vapor. First of all, Vapor is a subset of Vue. So you just need to switch the Vapor flag on. You can get faster speed and without learning a new framework to use it. So how fast is it? So how fast is Vapor? If you say Vanilla.js performance score is 100, the Vapor scored now is 90. That's faster than the virtual DOM. And thanks to Vapor compiler's AI architecture, besides template syntax, we also can compile from JSX to Vapor runtime. Big thanks to Gaofei for adding this JSX feature. And because there is no virtual DOM, Vapor's runtime size is smaller right now compared to virtual DOM mode. The runtime size is 53% smaller. So we covered a lot just now. So Vapor is Vue's new upgrade. It's a subset of Vue, and they can work together. Vapor makes things faster and bundle size smaller. It will have better JSX support, and Vapor has many more plans for the future. All these features wouldn't be possible without every contributor in the Vue community. I want to thanks for their work. So about contribute, let me introduce my way to open source. I remember when I first contributed with Vapor, one day I saw Kevin on Twitter saying, "Who wants to help write Vue Vapor? If you can find me, I can teach you how to do it." At that time, I didn't know what Vapor was, but I was really into Vue. So I bought a train ticket for the next day to find Kevin. And after I came back, I looked at Vapor's code all night, but couldn't understand it. It's too difficult. I cried, feeling like I could get it at all. But literally in the next day, I looked many more times and finally understood it. No, I've written lots of code for Vue. But now I write lots of code for Vue Vapor. So when first joining open source, stepping out what felt safe. Interest is really the best teacher and gives you lots of energy. Later, I also sent PRs to Vue Core. That PR took about a year to be accepted, the same kind of PR in Vue Vapor would take just a day or two. The people who keep the project running need to check each PR very carefully to avoid breaking things. And these big projects often have many PRs waiting with only 2 or 3 people. 2 or 3 contribute checking them. So the people who keep the project running need to check each PR very carefully to avoid breaking things. And these big projects often have many PRs waiting with only 2 or 3 full-time main people checking them. So it makes sense why we wait so long when contribute these projects. Instead, contribute new projects like Vapor that you like and that are growing faster is a bad choice. They accept PR faster, often change their code, and have more chances to contribute. For example, things that don't yet, or problems that needs to fixing, many of these are easy to find and fix. Really, even then, even after I read Vue Vapor's code all night, when I want to find Kevin, I had no idea what I could do, and Kevin had to think for a long time too. Back then, I knew almost nothing about Vapor. Uh, and at and that day, Kevin taught me a lot, but it was hard to understand all this complex stuff in such a short time. The only single things I remember is I could help write unit tests, because if I could fix the broken tests, I could mark the tests as to do or failing in this PR. This way, others in this community would know there was a to-do test here. This is very important. While reading our old tests and trying to write new ones, I learned how the project worked at a deeper level. Then, the next day, after I went back, I found a broken test that was very simple, and I thought I know how to fix it. I decided to submit a fixed PR. This is a good thing about writing unit tests. You quickly find some test cases that you think you know how to fix. Don't worry about making mistakes. This was our next step. Fix something. If you keep doing it, you'll get better at this process. And by this time, all the project contribute will know who you are. If they want to add a simple new features, you can confidently say, I want to try to build this. Again, don't worry about mistakes or failing at this point. You are get started to help building a new feature. As you understand the project better and become known by other developers for your help, you'll do more than just write code. You also share your ideas and other other actual helpers will build them. By this time, you'll become an important part of this project. Doing all these things take a lot of time, and even more as you get deeper into the community. based on how much time you have and what feels comfortable to you. You can stop anywhere along this path and enjoy this level's open source work. That's my Vapor open source story. And I very hope to see your story here too. So today we invented Vapor together. Then we talked about its performance, its architecture, its roadmap, and thanks to the contributes and got my open source story. That's all for this talk. I pre-test these sessions many times, so I hope it's not too bad. And I hope you can like it, and I hope you found something for it. And thank you for joining us.
All right, y'all. Thank you, Resumu, for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. We have a couple videos to watch of Vue certification and a Mighty Byte video. And then up next, Alec Lictor. So see you back shortly.
Hi, so the next Mighty Byte is about how we're going to store our component design with Storybook in Vue applications. So when I run that automatically in it, you can see here, it will just doing everything for me, and I did add Storybook support to my application. What does it add? It will add a script command for Storybook and a script command for building the Storybook for deployment. It will add several packages for the add-ons like interactions or for onboarding, for essentials. Even you can also add it for accessibility. In addition, it have the folder called Storybook where we have a main, which will this is where you add anything else. For example, if you want to add more, this where you can define the story, where the framework to use, all the add-on you want to add it. And the preview is how you can wrap the story inside. Let's say if you want to wrap it with some header, or you want to add in some icon or load in some icon library before. And in here, I already wrote something called a Pokemon story. Great. You can see it comes with some example. I have one component. So how do this Pokemon story look? So this Pokemon story will have we have a title, which is the component stand for the header, and then the story itself, the component itself. I pass the component. I pass the tag for auto document extracting from your props, and then I pass a Pokemon that is sample Pokemon, and I create a first story called primary for the Pokemon itself. So when you go here, you have a primary, and it will display the Pokemon result. But you can see here the Pokemon is not exactly the same like in this one with the fonts. It is because in our application we have the font defined in the global style. So to fix it, we can go to preview and we can make sure that we import the global style, which is the asset, and we do the I think it's the base CSS, and that's it. We have everything here, and you can also define the actions. You can also, let's say, enable the visual testing for accessibility, or you can interact it with it, where you can see the skeleton and other interactions. Check it out and try it. Let me know how it goes. Thanks.
All right. So up next, we have Alex Lichta. View it yourself features that are missing in your favorite framework, our favorite framework. Alex is a web engineering consultant and Next team member. When he's not working on open source projects, he's giving talks, writing blogs, and recording educational videos and assisting companies with their projects, offering guidance and support with a focus on Next and Vue. Welcome to the stage, Alex.